Tonight, the Nolan Wells investigation into the death of a shining star, Nolan Wells, has an altercation witness emerged. A witness that claims she saw an altercation at Horn Island.
Everybody who watched that episode of Crime Stories came away talking about the woman on the boat, the witness who says she saw a fight. That is the clip that traveled. That is what filled the comment sections overnight. But the most important thing said in that hour had nothing to do with her. It came near the end, from a defense attorney, in about 90 seconds, and almost nobody picked it up. It changes what this grand jury actually is. And once you understand that, every other argument from that broadcast reads differently. So I am going to start at the end. Two things before I do. Nobody has been charged in this case. Not one person. Every individual discussed on that broadcast is a witness, a bystander, or somebody who spoke to law enforcement voluntarily. I will not name private individuals who have not been charged, and I am asking you not to name them below. The cause of death has not been released. 2 autopsies have been performed. The state's autopsy is reportedly complete, and its findings are not public. So anyone telling you how Nolan Wells died is offering an opinion. That includes the panel on that broadcast. That includes me. Here is the complete list of things that are settled.
A Nolan Wells phone evidence torpedo.
2 confirmed witnesses that saw Nolan Wells on the island around 6 p.m. The Triton, as you said, left around 4:30.
What witnesses? Where? Who, what, where, why, and when?
I have not spoken publicly about this before, but I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells from a boat nearby. What I saw has stayed with me, and I believe it's important information. I have provided or intend to provide my account to the appropriate investigators because Nolan's family deserves the truth. Out of respect for the ongoing investigation, I won't speculate beyond what I personally observed. While I was on the boat near the area, I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells and several other individuals. I saw what appeared to be an argument that escalated after there was a dispute involving Nolan's phone. I heard Nolan yelling for his phone to be returned. The argument continued after the group reached shore, and I observed a physical fight involving Nolan and multiple people. I also observed a young woman telling them to stop. At that point, I left the area because the situation had appeared to be getting worse. I did not remain long enough to witness what happened afterward. Everything beyond what I personally observed would be speculation, so I cannot honestly say what occurred after I left. Then she said she messaged one of the individuals that she saw, "Hey, I just want to say I was a passenger on another boat and I saw the argument between you guys and will go to the police with this information. I also have video footage. My husband doesn't show much, but it shows the argument that was taken and how you guys were upset at Nolan because of the young lady."
That from Secret Service Sam on TikTok. Okay. How is this helping the investigation? I'm trying to make sense of so many people online making comments. Now, if this is true, if there is a witness who has a husband with her on the boat and they took a certain amount of video, it could change everything, especially if the video is time stamped. Straight out to veteran trial lawyer, defense attorney Philip Dubay joining me. He's joining us out of LA, formerly in the public defender's office. They try a ton of cases. Philip, first of all, has she turned it into police? She said she was. If she hasn't, I give her no credibility at all. Look, I want this to be true. Why? Because I want the video. I want to see the timestamp on the video. I want to see, was he still on Horn Island at 4:30 when his acquaintances on the Triton boat left? I want that video. And if she hasn't brought this forward to LE, law enforcement, then it means nothing to me. I mean, if I know a young man turns up dead in the water And I know there's a controversy surrounding this. I mean, we know she knows that because she's gone online and posted it. Then why not hand it over to police?
Agreed. And it should go to the grand jury for part of their investigation. But I got to tell you, if I were cross-examining her, should this even go to trial, the first question I'd ask her on that 4th of July, what she had been drinking. Before that video got activated, everybody would want to
Please,
what
put him up.
drinking and smoking. You know how many people were
Okay,
partying
man.
out?
Have you lost your mind? You defend criminal cases. I bet everybody you put on the stand has either been high, drunk, or worse during the altercation. Well, every witness is not a nun, a priest, or a virgin. Everybody on Horn Island was drinking, man. What are you talking about? I don't care if she took a drink. I want the video.
You want the truth, is what you want. You want the truth. And let's be
Yeah, and that
clear,
would be the video.
remember, Nancy,
Okay.
is not consistent
Brandon
with the
Tatum is joining us. So after all that, all you have to say is, was she drinking? That's your takeaway from that. Joining me is Brandon Tatum, former police officer, Tucson, now star of The Officer Tatum on YouTube, who famously has interviewed the acquaintances who all say they had nothing to do with it. Let's just put that out there. He's interviewed them extensively. I want to talk about not what you want to talk about, Brandon Tatum, which is they had nothing to do with this, because I met them and I believe them. So noted. Can we talk about a potential witness to an altercation? And she seems to suggest it was over Katie. Why? Don't know what the altercation was. Maybe it was, hey, leave her alone and get on the boat. Or leave her alone, she's my girlfriend. Or it could be anything. But if there is a witness placing Nolan seemingly in the water, I can't tell that, but having an argument with another person, a partier at Horn Island, that is significant. It could prove or disprove your friend's timeline.
Well, Nancy, I think that it's a big obstacle to climb here because I've never heard of this altercation whatsoever. Nobody that I've talked to have alluded that this altercation was real. And also Katie, whom I saw her text messages, she didn't even say this altercation occurred. What I will say is that if I was an investigator in this investigation, I want to hear that. I want to be able to compare that information to other things that we may have or other witness statements. But I don't think it's significant because it doesn't show if Nolan Wells was actually killed in that altercation. She's claiming that there was an altercation between him arguing with somebody else. There was a potential fight, but that doesn't get me to how did he drown? How did he get in the water? And how did he not recover and come home to his family? So I would take that into consideration. I would compare that to the other interviews that I've done, but I don't think it's significant whatsoever. However, I would be incredibly skeptical because there's no other statements that I've heard from anybody that comes even close to an altercation with Nolan Wells and others over a girl.
Number one, he's dead shortly after an alleged altercation with another male. We think over a woman. See, in my world, I put together both circumstantial and direct evidence. Direct evidence would be, for instance, DNA or a fingerprint. Circumstantial evidence is the timing of the alleged altercation and his death. Right?
Nancy,
so
but Nancy,
it's hard for me to believe that there's some kind of altercation on Horn Island just before he dies. And they were not
Nancy,
connected. That's hard for me to believe that.
Well, Nancy, she's not saying he lost the fight. She's not saying that he got beat up. If you look at the autopsy, there's no clear signs of blunt force trauma to his face or any of the vital areas that could kill him. So it doesn't appear that there's any indication that he lost a fight, that there was enough trauma in this particular fight that would lead to his death. And when you look at the autopsy, there is no blunt force trauma to his face. There is no lacerations or damages to the back of his head. This is redness that was underneath the skin.
Oh, wait, are you looking at the screen? Because I'm looking at a big red mark on the back of his head.
Yeah, but this is underneath the skin. This is not a big red gash that's in the back of his head, which would be consistent with blunt force trauma. This is something that occurred underneath the skin that could have been from pooling of blood after his death due to,
Okay, I need to explain something.
I'll let the experts talk about specifics, but it doesn't appear that
okay, let's do
there
that.
is any
But I
blunt
want
force
everyone to
trauma consistent.
understand why Officer Tatum is here. Officer Tatum and Philip Dubé and others on our panel tonight are taking a particular side, right? It's called cross-examination, and it is similar to what happens in court. A theory emerges, a line of questioning emerges, and the other side tests it with fire under cross-examination. And then, hopefully, you get to the truth. Right now, we're talking about an alleged eyewitness to an altercation just before Nolan Wells is dead.
Nolan Wells went to Horn Island on the 4th of July. He did not come home. His body was recovered from the water on July 6th. 2 autopsies were performed and the results have not been released. The elected district attorney in Jackson County, Mississippi, has confirmed she will present the case to a grand jury. That is it. 5 sentences. Everything past that line is contested. Now the thing that got buried. Philip Dubé explained that Jackson County uses a procedure that descends from the old coroner's inquest. Historically, when a death was violent, sudden, or unexplained, a panel would sit and hear testimony for the purpose of establishing the manner and cause of that death. Mississippi folded that function into the grand jury. Read that again slowly, because of what it implies. This grand jury is not only being asked whether somebody should be indicted, it is also being asked to help establish what happened. Its findings feed into completing the death certificate with a cause and a manner of death. That breaks the frame almost everyone online is using. People are treating this as a switch with 2 positions. Somebody gets charged, or the case dies. That is not the structure. This proceeding can return a determination about how Nolan Wells died without returning an indictment against a single person. Dubé's read is that they may not yet know whether a homicide occurred, may not have a settled cause of death, and have deliberately combined the cause of death question and the criminal question into one proceeding so both can be resolved in the same room. Then Nancy asks him the old question. Does a grand jury just do what the prosecutor wants? The ham sandwich line. He says yes, they will. That cuts in both directions, and only one direction ever gets discussed. A prosecutor who believes a crime occurred can generally get an indictment. A prosecutor who does not believe one occurred can generally get a no bill. In a closed proceeding with no defense present, the posture of the person standing at the front of that room carries enormous weight. So the grand jury is not the finish line people think it is. It is a room where 2 separate questions get answered at once, and we may only ever see the answer to one of them. If you are new here, subscribe. We are following this case to whatever that room decides. Now go back to the rest of the broadcast with that in mind, because there is one question underneath all of it. Was Nolan Wells still on that island after the boats left? That is the whole case. The group departed around 4:30 in the afternoon. There are reports of Nolan being seen closer to 6. If he was still out there after those boats pulled away, the pool of people who could plausibly have been involved in anything shrinks dramatically. If he was not, it shrinks in a completely different direction. Every argument on that panel, every rumor in your feed, every theory in the comments traces back to that gap. So the honest way to judge each piece of that episode is to ask what it does to that gap. Some of it closes ground, most of it does not. Start with the witness, since that is what people watched it for. A woman came forward saying she was a passenger on a boat near Horn Island that day. Her account, as read on air, is that she saw an argument involving Nolan and several other people, that it escalated after a dispute over a phone, that she heard him yelling for his phone back, that the argument continued once the group reached shore, that it became a physical fight involving multiple people, and that a young woman was telling them to stop. She says she left because it looked like it was getting worse, and she does not know what happened after that. The most interesting thing about that statement is where it stops. She does not tell you how the fight ended. She says anything beyond the point she left would be speculation, and she was not going to speculate. That is genuinely unusual. Fabricated stories almost always have an ending, because the ending is the entire reason somebody invents one. This one just cuts off in the middle. That does not make it true. It could be an honest sighting of completely different people, but notice that the account is not built to accuse anybody of causing a death. She never says he lost. She never says he was hurt. She never connects the fight to what came afterwards.
If she has not handed this over to the police, it doesn't mean a hill of beans to me. But Tatum has a good idea, and that is, let's let an expert discuss it. To Joseph Scott Morgan, death investigator, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University. You can see him now on a hit podcast. It's on YouTube, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Joe Scott, if there had been not a blunt force trauma that Officer Tatum is describing, but a fist fight, if there had been a fist fight, plus body in water for multiple days, body decomposition, would you expect to see red marks on the hands at that juncture, on the face? What would you expect if there had been a fisticuffs?
Yeah, you would see, well, first off, above discolored areas, like consistent with contusions. If there are facial strikes or just body blows, you can actually see abraded areas over the surface of his fingers. And these are very subtle sometimes. And if there is decomposition, which we believe there is, particularly per the second autopsy that was performed, he didn't make note of this. And can I go one more step with this? And this is kind of graphic, but people need to understand this. This physician that did the second autopsy actually did what's referred to as a coronal sectioning of the face. So there were multiple incisions made into Nolan's face in this autopsy, this second autopsy. And this guy didn't see anything. He didn't see anything that was of import relative or indicative of blunt force trauma. And I would think that if there was contact, particularly if he's fighting a group of people, these sorts of things, you're going to have injuries probably on the leading edges, or what we refer to as the blade of the arm right here on the forearm, the back of the hands, the knuckles, those points of contact. And certainly if there's facial strikes going on with him, which we find with blunt force trauma many times with fisticuffs, as you say, you'll see these strikes, you'll see marks on the face. There's nothing to indicate that in the second autopsy. Now, what the state has, I don't know, but I do know this. I know they're saying they're done with the autopsy and that it's complete, which means the gross findings in the autopsy room, the tox, the histology, that means that autopsy report is complete. They just hadn't released their findings yet.
And speaking of that, Joe Scott Morgan, I've heard the same, that the autopsy is complete.
Yeah.
There are reports that there is no cocaine in Nolan's system. That's uncorroborated reports,
Okay.
but a good source. No cocaine in the system.
Yep.
Joe Scott, when the body has been in the elements, such as the water, for that long, how can I confirm if he had been drinking or not?
Oh, you can still pull a BA, blood alcohol, or blood ethanol level, as it's referred to. And again, Nancy, we're not talking about someone that has been down for weeks and weeks. We can still do the BA, and it can come from urine, blood. We can still draw urine and find it pretty effectively. You'll have what's referred to as qualitative. We've talked about this before, and I know you understand that, but so our friends understand. You have a qualitative amount, which they say, yes, it is present. And then you have a quantitative amount where they do the measurement of the BAC, the blood alcohol content. Just think about DWI, DUI, wherever you're from, those levels. And then we get up to those lethal levels. That's really what I'm interested in relative. And yeah, I'm interested in any of the other toxicological findings you might have relative to anything illicit or illicit drugs, but particularly with alcohol, because that has been kind of this thing that has been said over and over and over again. Well, let me see it. I want to know what the blood alcohol level was like. And historically, I would like to know what his level of experience has been with alcohol. As you well know, because of cases you've worked on in the past, Nancy, if you're a lightweight, if you've never had anything to drink and you start taking on copious amounts of alcohol, and you're kind of a neophyte in this area, it can have very, very lethal outcomes.
Let me understand. Joe Scott Morgan joining us, star of Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan on YouTube and Death Investigator. When I'm asking you, even if the body has been in the elements for a period of days, can I still get a blood alcohol? Maybe not from urine, but you certainly can't do a blood test. But can you take human tissue from one of the organs and extract a blood alcohol from human tissue?
It'd be very difficult. Generally, the liver is the best candidate. We'll spin that down. We'll take a section of it, spin it down, and liquefy it. But again, I submit to you, Nancy, that he has not been down long enough to compromise the ability to get at least
Get
a
a
quantitative amount. Yeah, to get a BA.
Okay. To Philip Dubé joining me, a veteran trial lawyer, defense attorney out of the LA jurisdiction. I'm not quite sure why you're so focused on who had been drinking. Let's take a look at the video. Let me answer that for you. Everybody was drinking. Okay, everybody had a snootful. So, even someone drinking can see an altercation, Dubé.
No, of course you can. And I can see that crowd of people out there. It was a bustling, hot 4th of July afternoon. But who's to say that the people that she saw included Nolan Wells? And that's why you got to get into her ability to perceive and recollect being impacted by intoxicants such as alcohol. I would want to know if she had imbibed. I really would. Not to mention, the autopsy findings thus far do not reflect any type of physical insults or injury to his body. At most, what you have are
I'm asking
signs.
you about your fixation on the witness having been drinking. Joe Scott Morgan has already addressed the body. I'm talking to you about the alleged witness.
Yeah. If she had in fact been drinking, I do believe, unless they really have a video showing him in HD quality, showing that he was in a fight, then I would call her ability to perceive, recollect, and even state that there was an altercation going on in her presence.
You know, Brandon Tatum joining us, Officer Tatum on YouTube. I've cross-examined a lot of witnesses, and I cross-examined them exactly on that. How far away were you? Did you know the target? Were you familiar with them? Was your vision obstructed by anything? Were you wearing glasses? Were you wearing sunglasses? What time of the day? I mean, I could go on and on and on. But unless you have a nun, a priest, or a virgin on the stand, or maybe Angel Gabriel might come down and testify, you have to take your witness as you find them. And I'm sure you've had a lot of drunk witnesses in Tucson, to everything from a bar fight to a murder to a dope deal. Look, I'd say a good 50% of witnesses were drunk at one time or the other. That doesn't mean they didn't see what they saw.
Well, from a law enforcement perspective, this is not cross-examination on the stand. This is us, what I would deal with a witness is right on the scene. And I'm not too concerned of whether the person is drunk or not. I'm not going to test their blood alcohol level on the scene. I want to know specifically, what did you see? What are the identifying markers that you have to say that this is Nolan? If that person can describe them, maybe we'll do a show up. If we have like a video or a picture or something, we could show them and say, hey, does this match the person you think that was here? Then we'll have a good perspective. But there is a challenge here, because you do have to identify him. You can't just say it was a black man out there with curly hair and I think it was Nolan. You're going to have some clear identifying markers that this is Nolan, and then you have to identify the people he was fighting with and the girl. And I think this person is going to have a big challenge. I saw this text message. We reached out to the girl on her social media. She never responded to us. I don't know if she ever really sent it in to the police, but it is problematic, in my opinion, if she hasn't. If you're going to say somebody is going to spend time in jail, or you're alluding to the fact they've committed a crime, and the fact now that we know that Nolan did not survive being out there at Horn Island, and you never submitted that to law enforcement, there's a potential that's tampering with evidence. If you have evidence of a crime and you're withholding that from law enforcement, and you knowingly and intentionally are doing that, that could be very problematic for a person who claimed to be a witness.
No. Morally, it's wrong, but there is no duty under the law that you have to report yourself as a witness, that you have to volunteer information. You can stand on the side of a pool and watch somebody drown and do nothing unless you have a fiduciary capacity, and it's not a crime in our jurisprudence. So nothing is compelling her under the law to come forward. However, interesting, she did post it. She did identify herself. She did say she was going to police, and that would be my first line of cross. Did you take this to the police? And if she said no, all HELL break out in that courtroom. If you have information like this and you don't go to the police,
Nancy,
fur would fly. Fur would fly. You ever seen a dog fight? That's what I mean by that. Fur would fly. So that would be a line of cross-exam. Hold on, something else. Before I go out to Susan Hendricks, Jeff Shetler, and Ben Dobrin, now information that there is, in fact, a criminal investigation.
Hearing that somebody who has an inside source is saying the DA's office in Mississippi is now looking at the Nolan Wells case as a criminal investigation and no longer an accidental drowning. Now, we can only pray that this is true. Obviously, we can't celebrate. We can't get excited at all because I have not seen Ben Crump announce this. It is not being reported by any other major media sources, but there are rumblings.
From Sam Crouppen. All right. I would like to point out that his source is a, quote, little birdie. Little birdies are saying that an inside source says the DA's office is now looking into the Nolan Wells as a criminal investigation. I can't put that up on the stand. Susan Hendricks joining me, investigative journalist and author of Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi. Susan, you get laughed out of court if your witness said, a little birdie told me. Number one, that's hearsay, but a little birdie?
Yeah, exactly. It makes me wonder, did that woman, those text messages about some sort of altercation, is the grand jury analyzing this as we speak? Because finally the DA came out and said, look, I can't release anything that's going on, but let it be clear, and I'm paraphrasing, that we are investigating this with a grand jury.
Susan Hendricks, you're absolutely right. She states most recently, this is the elected district attorney, my obligation and commitment is to present the grand jury with all the evidence collected in the case in order for them to reach a decision based on a thorough investigation, complete evidence presentation, the actual truth, and an understanding of the law. I'm obligated to do so in keeping with the law and the rules of the court. She goes on to state, I stand firmly on the rule of law and my ethical obligation. That is what the people of Jackson County elected me to do. I will present the grand jury with a thorough, complete, and fair investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. Now, is there a criminal investigation? According to some sources, there is. We keep hearing there is no criminal investigation. To Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter, what is the truth of it tonight?
Nancy, it hasn't been announced that there's a criminal investigation, but it just stands to reason that they are doing a full investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. At this point, we don't have a cause of death, Nancy. They have not released the reports on the autopsy that was done by the state, completed weeks ago. We don't know anything. Nothing's been released. So whether they're doing a criminal investigation or not, I think it stands to reason they are investigating to every piece of evidence they can find to determine what happened and what they can present, they being investigators, to the grand jury.
Nobody constructing a story to get people arrested constructs that story. Then there is the phone, an argument that starts over a phone, with him yelling for it back. That is a small, ordinary, unglamorous detail. It is not what you reach for when you are trying to sound dramatic. Phone evidence has been an open thread in this case since early on, so a stranger independently describing a fight about a phone is either coincidence or it is not, and neither of those options is boring. None of it is verified. We do not know who she is. We do not know her distance from shore. We do not know whether she has actually given a statement to investigators or when. She says she has or intends to. That is not confirmation. She also says her husband recorded video from the boat. She says it does not show much, but it shows the argument, and she says she messaged one of the individuals she saw, telling them she was there, that she saw it, and that she would be taking the information to police. There are two readings of that message, and I cannot tell you which is right. The human reading is that she saw something ugly, later learned a young man had died, and reached out to the one face she recognized because she was unsettled and wanted to know whether she had seen what she thought she saw. People do that constantly. The other reading is that she was letting somebody know what she had in her possession. You cannot separate those two from a screenshot. Neither can I. Neither can anyone in your comments who says they can. But apply the test. What does that video do to the gap? Everything if it exists and if it carries a timestamp. Nothing else discussed in that entire hour can put a clock on that shoreline. That is the only reason the video matters. Not because footage of an argument proves anything about a death. Because a timestamp is a fixed point, and this case is starving for fixed points. Now the pushback, which mostly got aimed at the wrong target. Dubé was asked what he would do with her on cross-examination, and said the first thing he would ask is what she had been drinking that day. That got a strong reaction online. I think the reaction is misplaced. He is a defense attorney answering honestly. Attacking perception and memory is the standard opening move against any witness in any case, and it is what defense attorneys are supposed to do. Where he overreaches is treating it as decisive. Nancy's answer is the correct one. You take witnesses as you find them. It was the 4th of July on a barrier island with a reported 60 or more people out there. Alcohol was in that scene somewhere, and probably in most of it. If drinking disqualified testimony, most bar fight prosecutions in this country would collapse before they started. Intoxication goes to wait. The jury hears it and decides for itself. The far stronger objection nearly got lost underneath it, and it came from Brandon Tatum. Identification. You cannot say you saw a black man with curly hair on that shoreline and conclude it was Nolan Wells. That is the real weakness here, and it has nothing to do with alcohol. Think about the actual conditions. She is on a boat. There is water between her and the shore. It is a crowded holiday afternoon. She is watching strangers she had no reason to look at closely until things escalated. So how does she know? That is not a hostile question. It is the first question any competent investigator asks. What was he wearing? How far were you? Was your view blocked? Did you see his face? Can you pick him out of a photograph? Can you identify the others involved? Because you will be asked to. If she can answer those cleanly, this account becomes serious. If she cannot, her honesty is irrelevant, because honest people misidentify strangers constantly and always have. Tatum handled that the way a police officer would. He said he would not be worried about blood alcohol at the scene. He would want identifying markers and a photo confirmation. That is the correct process, and it is more useful than the cross-examination angle. Where I part ways with him is on significance. His position is that even if there was an altercation, it does not explain how Nolan ended up in the water, so it does not matter. That is half right. A fight does not by itself explain a death in water, but that is not what makes something significant during an investigation. If a disputed event happens in the same place shortly before a death, any theory of what happened has to account for that sequence. It does not prove a connection. It means an explanation that treats them as unrelated now owes you a reason. That is precisely why you chase it instead of shelving it. He also says he has not heard about this altercation from anybody he has spoken to. Fair as far as it goes. But the people he has spoken to are a specific group. If this woman is not in that group, their silence about her account does not disprove it. Skepticism is the right posture here. That particular reason is just weaker than it sounded on air. Tell me below where you land. Worth chasing or noise? I read these. Now the forensics, which was the most genuinely useful stretch of the hour. Joseph Scott Morgan explained what a physical fight typically leaves on a body, and I want to translate it out of professional shorthand. The body records a fight in predictable places. Discolored areas consistent with bruising, scraped surfaces across the fingers, marks along the outer edge of the forearm because that is what you raise to block, marks on the knuckles and the backs of the hands because that is your point of contact when you throw, marks on the face if the face was struck. That is the expected pattern, especially against more than one person. He says that according to the second autopsy, that pattern was not documented. He notes that the physician performed a detailed examination of the facial tissues, which goes beneath the surface, specifically to find injury invisible from outside. Nothing indicating blunt force injury was noted. On the mark visible at the back of the head, the position taken on the broadcast is that it appears to be discoloration beneath the skin rather than an open wound, and that pooling of blood after death can produce exactly that appearance. If you are following this case honestly, you take that seriously rather than scrolling past it because it points away from your theory. 3 limits on it. Decomposition, which Morgan raises himself. The body was in warm water roughly 2 days, and decomposition was present. Decomposition destroys exactly the subtle findings he just listed. Bruising becomes unreadable early. The absence of a subtle finding after time in warm water is weaker evidence than that same absence on a fresh examination. Second, the witness account does not actually claim he was beaten. She describes a fight. She does not say he was overwhelmed or knocked down or injured. Most scuffles between young men leave nothing detectable 3 days later in summer water. Third, and this is the big one, everybody is discussing the second autopsy. The state's autopsy is reportedly complete and has not been released. Every forensic conversation happening in public right now, that broadcast included, and this video included, is taking place around a document none of us have read.
I understand the public's urgency to know what happened to Nolan, but we are not taking time for time's sake. We are taking the time required to complete the work this investigation demands. Since Nolan was reported missing, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies have worked around the clock investigating what happened to him. Every piece of evidence must be examined. Every credible lead must be followed to its conclusion. Every witness interview must be analyzed in context of all other evidence. The pressure for answers does not change what the work requires. Our responsibility to Nolan and our community is to complete this investigation thoroughly, carefully, without compromise, supported by the evidence and worthy of the confidence of the people we serve. I also understand that many people have questions about why more information has not been released publicly. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict the information a prosecutor can release during an investigation. Our restraint in communicating facts and evidence is not an effort to keep the truth from the public. It is an effort to protect the integrity of this investigation and the grand jury proceeding.
And tonight, more rumblings that the wrong boat was searched.
The MDMR report states that the searched vessel was called a tide craft, right? On July 8th. But witnesses show he used a tide line boat on July 4th. In the MDMR report, right down at the bottom in the yellow, it says tide craft, not tide line.
From Sam Crouppen to Ben Dobrin, emergency response diving instructor and trainer. Ben, thank you for being with us. What about the mistake in the name of the boat, if it was in fact a mistake? And could that explain any problem in getting GPS information?
Well, absolutely, because they're two different brands of boats. It's like saying, I'm going to search a Ford, and then you go out and search a Chevrolet in a car. They're very different brands of boats. And so if they were searching the wrong boat, then any information on that boat would be the wrong information. So if you're going after the GPS plotter on the Chevrolet, but you want the GPS plotter off of the Ford, they have no bearing. And so if you're searching the incorrect boat, you have incorrect evidence.
To Brandon Tatum, star of The Officer Tatum on YouTube, we just saw some video from your show, and I'm trying to figure out, among other things, what time and day, if you have a time and a date stamp on that, that seemingly shows the Triton with a lot of people on it leaving the island, leaving Horn Island. Do you have a timestamp on that?
I don't have the timestamp. I can ask them to see if they can get it to me. When I watched this video and they presented it to me, this was during the time that the CETO call was occurring. So it had to have been right around that time. You could see Wyatt on the boat on the phone. And so this is how it was presented to me. And just to kind of answer your question about the boat searches, it's partially irrelevant depending on the investigation and the interviews that they've done. There is no indication that there was a crime committed on any one of these boats. When you have 60 people that have already given statements to law enforcement, you have the young men that I interviewed that were on their boat that left the island, and then you have people that saw Nolan on the island after they had left. It's no indication that Nolan was on any one of those boats at any point in time and that a murder occurred on those boats. So regardless if they searched them or not, it was offered up for them to use a cadaver dog, but that never occurred. And so I don't really think that the boat situation or search is significant. The boys submitted their Life 360, which is how they got a GPS tracking of when they left the island and how they got from point A to point B, where they docked and all of those things. So all of the information has been concluded, or at least have been explored, and it didn't appear that there was any foul play on any one of the boats.
Okay. Officer Tatum, I respect everything that you just said, but to have a witness tell me it's true because I said so, and because my friends say so, that doesn't mean it's true to me.
This is GPS.
It could be true.
They provided
GPS. That doesn't tell me what happened to Nolan. Just because they got GPS,
they provided Life
they
360,
came back.
They provided Life 360. They provided the CETO call, and you can put those two things together and say, okay, the timeline matches. And if they left at 4:30, they were already gone. All three boats that came out were already gone when Nolan was last seen. So now you have a timeline that's consistent with evidence that they presented.
Right there. I was going with you until you said the time Nolan was last seen. Because their GPS data, I'm sure, is correct. And their Life 360 data, I'm sure, is correct. I'm not arguing with the technology. But what happened just before that? Where was Nolan when they're leaving the island? If you can place him on that island at 5 or 6 o'clock, please do it. And then I will turn attention elsewhere. I'm not trying to hang your friends, the people that you have interviewed. And I respect that you believe them, and maybe you're right. If he can be placed on that island at 5 or 6 o'clock, then they're in the clear. But I want to know who's placing them there, him there, and how.
Reports have come out that there's two reliable witnesses. TMZ reported on this. They said they saw Nolan a little bit before 6 p.m. There was also the young lady, Katie, who sent text messages to one of the boys that I interviewed. I saw the text messages where she alluded to the fact that she did not see Nolan get on the boat. She heard the boys yelling for Nolan to get on the boat. So Nolan never got back on the boat that he came on. So you have the boats leaving. You have a CETO call. You have testimony from everybody on the boat. And all of those things have to be taken in consideration. Also, They have already spoke to law enforcement about this. Them talking to me in the interview is them just telling the world what they told law enforcement. If there was any indication whatsoever that he was on the boat based on the testimony that was given from the boys or anybody else, even this new witness that have come forward, I think that there would be a significant investigation leading to an immediate arrest. But they clearly don't have any clear evidence that there is a crime that is committed, and especially a crime that was committed from the boys that I interviewed. I can't speak for everybody else, but I know the young men that I talked to, they were gone. There's no indication that Nolan was on the boat whatsoever. They're giving statements. Katie gave a statement. Even this person is claiming that they saw Nolan get into a fist fight. It appears that this person is claiming that the fight has happened after Wyatt and the rest of them had left on the boat.
Hi guys, Nancy Grace here. Please join us on Crime Stories and stream it first on Fox 1. When breaking crime news develops, we investigate it and bring it to you. Bombshell updates, answers to unanswered questions from cases making the headlines and cases you may never have heard of until Crime Stories. We go inside investigations with exclusive interviews, crime victims, families seeking justice, investigators, experts, and sources from within the case itself. Stay on top of the nation's biggest trials with us, including gavel-to-gavel coverage with real-time analysis. Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. Stream it first on Fox 1. I hope to see you there, and thank you, friend. Ben Dobrin joining us, emergency response diving instructor. What do you think regarding the boats, not just the Triton, but the other two boats that traveled with it?
My question is, where did he go in the water? They got him out of the water, obviously, on July 6th. But my question is, where did he go in the water and when did he get into the water? Was it a drowning? Bodies behave differently underwater, whether it's a drowning or it was a killing elsewhere. There's a lot of different variables. The body washed up very close to where he was last seen. There's a lot of current in that area. If it was a drowning, people generally sink when they drown. But if you don't drown and you're put in the water, you're more likely to float. And so there's a lot of variables that come into play of where the body was recovered versus where the body went in. And the timeline also, 2 days, if the body had been in the water for 2 days, that does lead to decomposition. The water temperature is around 85 to 88 degrees. That's very warm water, a lot of bacterial growth. And so a lot of different variables in play of where the body went in, where it came out, and the when. Those are my questions. He's an athletic young man. He's very muscular. Muscles sink in the water, fat floats. And so if he drowned, he was probably going to be on the bottom for a while. And if it was 2 days, that makes sense if he drowned and then washed up very close to where he went in. And so to me, that's a big piece of important information is, if he drowned, he was recovered very close to where he was last seen.
But what does that prove?
If he drowned and he floated, because in warm water, it takes 2 to 3 days for your body to decompose and float. It proves that he drowned, whether it was somebody holding him underwater or him trying to swim somewhere and wasn't a good swimmer. I have no idea. But we haven't gotten the results from the autopsy, and the autopsy is going to tell us a lot. If he drowned, that's an important piece of information. If he did not drown, that's even more important. You have somebody who was found in the water, his body was found in the water and did not drown. That's a very important piece of information. But if he did drown and they found him in the water, that can open up a lot more avenues for investigation at that point.
Philip Dubé joining us, veteran trial lawyer. Philip, we know because the district attorney has said she is presenting information to a grand jury. There are reports it is a criminal investigation. What do you make of the possibility this is a criminal investigation?
I'll tell you exactly what it is. Jackson County, Mississippi is one of the few jurisdictions in the United States that follows the old Sergeant Code. And what that was back in the day was the days of the coroner inquest, where if you had a violent, sudden, or casual death and they couldn't figure out what happened, you would impanel a jury where the medical examiner or the then appointed or elected coroner elicits testimony from people to try to determine manner and cause of death. What Mississippi did is they abrogated that and created this hybrid sort of coroner's inquest with grand jury investigation, where the grand jury will decide whether or not a death occurred and if there was a crime. And based on that, they can complete the death certificate with the cause and manner of death and decide if they're going to return a true bill of indictment against a suspect.
Is it your belief, Philip Dubé, that the grand jury presenter, and I have presented to literally hundreds of grand juries. That's one of the first things we would do in the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. Is it your belief that to a large degree, it depends on the leaning of the presenter? Does the presenter believe a crime occurred? Or does the presenter want a no bill? In other words, no indictment?
It's twofold. They want to determine, first of all, cause and manner of death and if it's a crime. And so they've sort of combined the roles of the grand jury leader, if you will, or the grand jury DA to help the grand jury make both determinations. So it's my opinion right now, they don't know if they even have a homicide. They don't even know the cause of death, but they've lumped in all the causality to criminality just to get it all in one.
Let me rephrase it, Dubé. Will the grand jury typically do what the presenter wants them to do? I mean, haven't you heard the phrase, a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich if the presenter wants them to?
Sure. Yes,
so is that
they
a yes?
will, but it is.
Okay, so we'll see what happens with this secret grand jury.
On toxicology, Morgan was clear and practical. Despite the time in water, a usable result is still obtainable. He separates a qualitative finding, which tells you a substance is present, from a quantitative finding, which tells you how much. He says a quantitative blood alcohol figure should still be reachable here. Where the usual samples are compromised, liver tissue is the standard fallback. Then he makes a point I think is badly underrated. He would want to know the person's history with alcohol, not just the number on the page. The same reading means different things for different people. Somebody who rarely drinks taking on a large volume quickly is in a very different physical state than a habitual drinker at an identical level. That is not a judgment about him as a person. It is pharmacology, and it bears directly on any theory involving water. There was also mention of uncorroborated reports about the absence of a particular substance in toxicology. Nancy flagged them as uncorroborated herself. I will flag them harder. That is a claim about a document from an unnamed source relayed on television. Wait for the report. Then the water evidence, which almost nobody is discussing, and which I think will matter most when that report finally lands. Ben Dobrin, an emergency response diving instructor, walked through what the water itself tells you. Bodies behave differently depending on how they entered it. People who drown generally sink at first. A body that entered the water without drowning is more likely to stay up. Lean, muscular bodies sink more readily than bodies carrying more fat, which is simple physics. Water temperature in that area at that time was somewhere around 85 to 88 degrees, which is very warm, which accelerates the bacterial activity that eventually brings a submerged body back up. In water that warm, he puts that at roughly 2 to 3 days. Set that against what happened. The body was recovered about 2 days later, close to where Nolan was last known to be, in an area with strong current. He is careful not to overstate it, and so am I. He is not saying that proves anything. He is saying it is consistent with a drowning near that location, and that if the autopsy says otherwise, then the something else is the entire story. His closing line is the cleanest thing anybody said in that hour. If he drowned, that is important. If he did not drown, that is far more important. A body recovered from water that did not drown in it is a completely different investigation. 2 smaller items, both worth a minute. The boat name. The claim is that an official report lists the searched vessel under one brand, while accounts of that day point to a different brand entirely. Dobrin's comparison is the right one. Two different manufacturers, the difference between searching a Ford and searching a Chevrolet. Pull navigation data off the wrong boat, and you have not collected weak evidence. You have collected irrelevant evidence, and you may not realize it. Two things are true at once. Clerical errors in official paperwork are common and usually exactly what they look like. Somebody typed a similar sounding name into a form. That is probably what happened, and I would not build a theory on it. But this is also exactly the kind of detail that becomes enormous in a courtroom 18 months later, because it speaks to how carefully the underlying work was done. A defense attorney never has to prove the wrong boat was searched. They only have to establish that the paperwork is unreliable enough that a jury cannot be sure of anything resting on it. Tatum's counter is that the boat question does not matter much, since there is no indication a crime occurred on any of those boats. He points to a large number of statements given to law enforcement, location data provided voluntarily, and a marine assistance call anchoring the timeline. That is reasonable, and I will say plainly that voluntarily handing over location data is not the behavior of people trying to hide a timeline. That deserves acknowledgement. But run it through the test again. Location data proves where a device was. It does not prove where every person was. The disputed question is whether Nolan Wells was still on that island after the boats departed. Data showing when the boats left answers a different question than the one being asked. The second item is the rumor, and I will give the broadcast credit here, because they ran a claim that supported the direction the show was leaning and then dismantled it on air. The claim is that an inside source says the district attorney's office is now treating this as a criminal investigation rather than an accidental drowning. It was attributed to a little birdie. Nancy's answer was that you cannot put that in front of a jury. Susan Hendricks agreed. It is hearsay, and not even good hearsay. Watch how that travels. Somebody with an audience says they heard something. It becomes a clip. The clip becomes a headline. Within hours, it is repeated as established fact by people who are forming hard opinions about who is guilty, based on a chain of custody that begins with an unnamed source quoting an unnamed source. Dave Mack gave the sensible correction. No criminal investigation has been announced, but a full investigation into the death is obviously happening, because that is what you do when a young man dies and nobody knows why. Investigating a death and reclassifying a death are not the same act, and those two ideas are being blurred together online constantly. Against all of that, here is the actual on-the-record statement, which is worth more than every rumor in this case combined. The district attorney has said her obligation is to present the grand jury with all of the evidence collected, so they can decide based on a thorough investigation, a complete presentation of that evidence, the actual truth, and an understanding of the law. She said she stands on the rule of law and her ethical obligation, and that she will present a thorough, complete, and fair investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. She also explained the silence. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict what a prosecutor can release during an investigation. She framed the restraint as protecting the integrity of the investigation and the grand jury proceeding, not as withholding truth from the public. You are allowed to be frustrated by that. The family is more than allowed. But that rule exists in every jurisdiction, and it protects the case and the uncharged equally. Silence at this stage is not evidence of a cover-up. So run the whole hour through the test one last time. The witness account does not close the gap on its own. Its value is almost entirely conditional on a timestamp and on whether she can survive an identification challenge. The forensic commentary narrows what happened, but not where or when, and it is built on the second autopsy while the state's report sits unreleased. The boat name discrepancy is probably clerical and could still matter enormously later. The water evidence is the only thing that speaks directly to how he entered that water, and it points toward a drowning near where he was last seen, subject to whatever the autopsy says. And the grand jury, the thing everyone is waiting on, is not a simple charge or no charge decision. It is a proceeding that may be asked to determine the cause of death itself. which means the outcome could be a determination with nobody charged. That is not a failure of the system. That is the system working exactly as Mississippi designed it, and a lot of people are going to be very angry when they realize that, because nobody explained it to them in advance. What there still is not, after all of that, is an answer. Not for the public, not for the family. If you know anything about where Nolan Wells was on that island after 5 o'clock that afternoon, do not post it online. Call the Jackson County Sheriff's Office at 228-769-3063. There is a $125,000 reward for information leading to the truth about what happened to him. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we will cover the grand jury outcome the moment it is public, and send this to somebody following the case, because accurate information protects the people who had nothing to do with this just as much as it helps find anyone who did. I will see you on the next one.